Today we'll do a new lesson, that is The Boy Who Asked for More, written by Charles Dickens. So before I read the lesson, let us know about the writer. Charles Dickens, born 1812, he is the greatest Victorian novelist and is known for his attack on the social evils like child labor and institutional cruelty. He is also an edited weekly journal, and also wrote 15 novels, hundreds of short stories, and he was regarded as an eminent writer of his age. And the noted work of his are David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, and A Great Expectation. And this story, this extract, is taken from Oliver Twist. It tells us how Oliver was forced out of the poor house. So before I go further reading the lesson and explanation, let us know about the gist of the lesson. This lesson is about a poor boy called Oliver, and his birth takes place in a miserable condition, and his mother's death adds to his misery. And he was also later named as Oliver Twist by Mr. Bumble, the town beadle. Town beadle means is an officer. And he was also in charge of the poor house. He starved and ill-treated the children who were under his care, and the poor little boy's plight in the poor house is highlighted. The suffering of Oliver and the other orphans is dealt with in touching way. One day, circumstances lead Oliver to go forward and ask for more food, and it was not for him but for the sake of other orphans. Ultimately, he was punished severely for doing so and was finally forced out of the poor house. First paragraph. Oliver was born in the poor house of a little country town on a cold black night in the winter of 1837. The birth was attended by a doctor who was hastily called for the purpose, and by an old pauper woman who was experienced in such a matter. So this paragraph tells us about where was Oliver Twist born. They say that he was born in the poor house, that means in a small house of a little country town, that means in a village, little country town, on a black night in the winter. That means born in a poor house, that means in a small house of a little country, that means in the village, on a black night in the winter, that means in the winter black night on 1837. Birth was attended by a doctor who was hastily means urgently, hurriedly. So birth was attended by a doctor who was hastily, that means who was hurriedly called for the purpose, and also by an old pauper woman. Pauper woman means the lady who might have lost everything and become poor, who was experienced in such matter. So these two lines tells us that his birth was attended by a doctor who was hurriedly, that means who was called hurriedly for the purpose, that is for treat the patient. And doctor was accompanied by a pauper woman, that means the poor woman who had experience in such matters also. So this paragraph tells us that he was born in a poor house in a country town on 1837 in a winter black night. And his birth was attended, means maybe the mother, that is Oliver's mother, would have been hospitalized for delivery, and hurriedly the doctor was called to attend her. So birth was attended, means she was attended by a doctor who was called hurriedly for the purpose, and he was accompanied by a pauper woman, a poor woman who had experience in such matters. Second paragraph. The mother died almost as soon as the baby took his first birth. As soon as the mother gave birth to a child, mother passed away. And she was young, good-looking woman. So here the line describes, okay, mother. It says that she is young, good-looking woman, and she was found lying in the street. She was found, where was she found? She was lying in the street. So these words, good looking, young, all these words, it describes, it's a describing word. Okay, it gives a description about a woman. So it is known as adjective. Okay, so here the writer says that she was a young, good looking woman and she was found lying in the street. It was clear that she had walked some distance before she died. So when we look at the situation that she was found lying in the street. So when we look at this situation, we come to know that this lady might have walked some distance before she died. Her shoes had been torn to pieces. Where she had come from, where she had been going, nobody knows. Come from. Okay. Next, third paragraph. The baby cried loudly. If he would have known that he was now an orphan of a poor house, it is likely that he would have cried still louder. So, baby cried loudly. As soon as the baby was born, it cried loudly. And if he would have known that he was now an orphan. Orphan means a child who had lost both the parents. So, orphan is a child who would have lost her parents. So, here the writer says that if he would have known that he is now in orphan, that is in a poor house, then it is likely that he would cried still louder. So here the writer tried to make us to understand that if the child, okay, which cried as soon as it took birth, if he would have known at present, if he would have known the situation that he is being brought up in the poor house, is going to be brought up in the poor house, and he is an orphan, he would have cried still louder. Okay, so fourth paragraph. They called him Oliver Twist. Later on, he was brought to the poor house and he was named as Oliver Twist, a name invented by Mr. Bumble, the town beadle. So who named him Oliver Twist? Mr. Bumble. Who is this Mr. Bumble? Town beadle. Town beadle means an officer. Okay, so after mother passed away, he was brought, that little child was brought to the house, orphanage, and there he was named as Oliver Twist by a person called Mr. Bumble. He is an officer. Okay, Mr. Bumble, the town beadle, because he could not think of any other name, so he named Oliver, that means the baby, as Oliver Twist. Mr. Bumble had a full authority over the people. That means he had control over the people of the poor house. So he is the officer, he is in charge of the officer. Here they are giving the description about a person. That means it says that he is a very powerful person. He had a complete control over the people, that is children in the poor house. And he thought himself a very great man. Mr. Bumble, who is officer, Mr. Bumble, he thinks that he is a very great man. He starved and ill-treated the children under his care. Okay, the children were there in the poor house, no? How they were treated? They were treated very badly. They were starved. Starved means suffer from hunger. That means he was not giving sufficient food to them. He starved them, ill-treated them. Okay, and the children who were under his care. Oliver's 9th birthday found him a pale thin child who had hardly known a kind word or met with a kindly look. That means here this lines explains us to understand that the children in the orphanage were not happy. They were ill-treated. They were not given sufficient food for them. Okay, so this Oliver was 9 years. Okay, but he looks very pale and thin. He was not healthy looking boy. Okay, and this makes us to understand that they were malnourished and they were not given sufficient food there. Okay, and his only friends were his little companions in misery. So friends whoever were there for it were the children who were in the poor house. Okay, those children who are in the poor house, who are in the same pitiable condition. Okay, those who are in misery, that means unhappy. Okay, so his only friends were his little companions in misery. That means in the people, that is the children who are in the orphanage. His friends are the children who are in the orphanage. Okay, but in the end they brought him trouble. Okay, his own friends, okay, who were in the little, that means who were in this orphanage, they brought him trouble. They persuaded means convinced him to ask for more. Okay, his own friends who were his little companions in the misery, that was those who were in the orphanage, okay, brought him trouble. How did they bring a problem to him? By persuading him, that is by convincing him to go and ask for more. Okay, so here the first question here, where was Oliver born? You can write, was born in a poor house of a little country. Who were present when Oliver was born? You can say the doctor and the pauper woman. What did the mother look like when she was alive? So the paragraph 2 words like young, good looking. And who was Mr. Bumble? Mr. Bumble is a town beadle. Okay, how did Mr. Bumble treat the children? You can write he is ill-treated and starved them. Okay, what did Oliver's friend want him to ask the master? So his children, that means his friends, persuaded him to ask for more. Fifth paragraph. It happened one evening at a supper time. The children were fed in a large stone hall with a big metal basin at one end. The master stood by the basin and served each child with a bowl of watery gruel. So here they say that supper time, that means in the night meal, during the night meal, the children were made to assemble in the big hall with the big metal basin at one hand. They keep a big metal basin at one hand, and next to that the master stand, and he began to serve the children with a small watery gruel. Gruel means a form of food, okay, boiled in water or milk. Okay, so the master stand next to the basin and he served the children a small watery gruel, bowl of watery gruel. And the boys generally have an excellent appetite. Appetite means a craving for food, and this small bowl of watery gruel is not sufficient. Okay, and Oliver and his companion were always hungry and they were never given enough to eat. Okay, so that evening one of the bigger boys stated quite clearly that unless he had an extra bowl of gruel, he would most certainly eat the boy who slept next to him. Okay, so since these children are provided only the small bowl of watery gruel, which is not sufficient for the growing children, so one of the senior boy, that means one of the bigger boy, had told their companion that if he had not served another bowl of watery gruel, he surely is going to eat a person who sleeps next to him. So this feared everyone there. Okay, so they have decided to form a council. A council was decided to form. That means a council means a group of people were called, okay, and to make the decision or make a decision. Okay, so a council was formed, and there Oliver Twist was appointed to walk up to the master after supper and ask for a more. That means ask for more gruel. Okay, so this is the thing what happened in the fifth paragraph. So fifth paragraph explains that it was in the supper time. That means the incident happened in the supper time, where the children in the poor house were served in a big large hall. Okay, and there a big metal basin is kept at one end, and the master stand next to it, and he serves the children with a small bowl of watery gruel. Okay, and which is not sufficient for the growing children. And one of the bigger boy in the poor house, he stated that unless he is being provided another bowl of watery gruel, he is surely going to eat the person who sleeps next to him. So this feared everyone, and they decided to form a council. Decided to make a council. That means to have a discussion and take up the decision. And in that council, they decided, that is, they appointed Oliver Twist, okay, to go to the master and ask for the extra gruel. That means to ask for more. Next paragraph, sixth paragraph. The gruel was served and was quickly swallowed. Okay, the watery gruel was served to the children, and they swallowed very fastly. The boys whispered among themselves, they began to talk among themselves in the low voice, and forced Oliver to go to the master and ask for more. Okay, he advanced. That means he went towards the master, bowl in a hand, and said in a little frightened voice, "Sir, I want some more." Okay, so he advanced to the master with the bowl in a hand and asked for the master that he want some more. Master was a fat, healthy person, turned very pale at this, and he couldn't believe his ear, and so he asked once again what he wants. So Oliver Twist again, he says us, "Please sir, I want some more." Okay, next, seventh paragraph. Master aimed the blow. So when Oliver asked master to serve him another bowl, master got wild and he aimed it on his head and seized his arms. He captured his arms in great force and shouted for the beadle. And for the beadle means to an officer. He called an officer. Okay, Mr. Bumble, as soon as the master had to call the beadle, that means an officer, Mr. Bumble rushes into the room, okay, in a great excitement. That means in a great enthusiasm. Okay, in a great enthusiasm, Mr. Bumble rushed into the hall. Okay, and was filled with the horror. Okay, when he heard of Oliver's crime. Okay, he was surprised to know that one of the poor child in his orphanage has asked for more, because till now nobody has come forward to ask for extra bowl. So he couldn't believe it. Okay, Mr. Bumble rushed into the room, okay, in a great excitement, and also he was very horror when he heard Oliver crying, that is, asked for more. Okay, and he also said, okay, Mr. Bumble also said that he never heard of such a thing. He says that I never heard such a thing. Okay, that is, in no one in his orphanage has, as a punishment for his greed and boldness. So what did he do? He asked for more. Okay, greed means desire, boldness means confidence. So what was his punishment? His punishment is that he asked for more. So that is the master considered it as a crime. Okay, so as a punishment for his crime, okay, Oliver was immediately locked in a room to spend the whole night alone. So as a punishment for his desire and confidence, he was put in a room and he has to spend the whole night alone. Okay, And next morning, a notice was pasted. Notice means a circular was pasted on the gate, offering a reward, stating that a person who buys this Oliver, any men and women who would like to take Oliver off from the poorhouse, they will be rewarded £5. Okay, so this paragraph, sixth paragraph states that as a punishment for his crime, okay, he was put in a room. That means he had to spend the whole night alone, and a notice was also pasted outside the gate stating that a person who wished to take Oliver off the house, he will be rewarded £5. Okay, last paragraph, conclusion part, it says that afterwards a coffin maker came to know about this notice and he will buy the orphan boy from the poor house. Coffin maker means the person who makes the coffin, that is a narrow box in which the dead body is kept. Okay, so he comes to the orphanage and he buy Oliver Twist, paying the that means receiving the reward of £5. But Oliver Twist faces a lot of difficulty here also. So in order to escape from this, he ran to London. Okay, there also he faced a lot of difficulties. However, by chance he will meet two kind people. Here he means Oliver Twist will come across two kind people, and they are known as Mr. Brownlee and Miss Rose Maylie. Okay, so there these kind people also discovered that he was their own relative and had to be protected from his step brother Mr. Monk. Okay, so Mr. Brownlee and Miss Rosie, they come to know that this Oliver Twist is one of their relative and he must be protected, okay, from the step brother, that is Mr. Monk. So this Mr. Monk had planned to take away Oliver's share of property. So Mr. Brownlee and Mr. Maylie wanted to save Mr. that is Oliver Twist from the step brother. So afterwards, with the help of these two kind people, Oliver gets his share of property and he lived happily.